Brendon Kleen, cold open question of the day for Friday, June 28th here on the Just Basketball Show. First ever NBA two-day draft. How do you feel about it?
Take it or leave it. That's a very vanilla, lukewarm answer.
Yeah,
probably
come on.
not.
Have a take.
The best way to kick off an exciting episode that has a lot of good stuff to hit on here on Thursday, June 27th, right after day 2 of that draft. I will say I am never going to complain about more NBA content. So the idea of another thing to watch, another round of podcasts and stuff and articles on Thursday morning, kind of leading in, and teams having more time to make trades that are actually interesting, which I would say we got a handful of today with guys like AJ Griffin moving. You don't often see players get traded in the second round in past years. It's really just 52 and 58 for 47 and a bunch of stuff we don't really truly care about outside of where those players end up. So I think it probably achieved what it was supposed to achieve, right? It gave teams a little more time to strategize. It gave us another news cycle, and it's more NBA content for people who love the NBA. So I know everyone wants to crap on it. Maybe if there's not a debate the same day next year, it'll be in prime time and be even better. But look, I think it kind of checked all the boxes, and Bronny James went right where we thought. So win-win-win all around for everybody here, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think what I find funny about it is really like the second round getting like even more of a spotlight. Like it almost feels, Brendan, like in some ways they wanted to make sure we didn't get another Caserito moment. You know, like they didn't want another pick where someone who one day will be randomly very good isn't getting they can't turn to a clip where like Stephen A. Smith or Seth Greenberg or whomever is on the draft is hyping up this second round guy, and so we knew 5 years ago that this guy was going to be really, really great, right? Like and when I was watching it today, that's what was going through my mind, is that they don't want Nikola Jokic 2.0, where there's a Taco Bell Quesarito ad that is like everyone throws up, you know? That's where my brain went.
It was interesting to me, though, kind of on that note, right, that a couple of the guys, Furphy and Filipowski, who were in the green room, invited to the green room for night 1 at Barclays Center, were not invited to Seaport Studios at ESPN, where the second round all took place. That was a little strange, right?
Someone will be having a meeting, though, like whoever like did the invites and like wherever the intel broke down, that those guys weren't actually going to be like, you know,
that happens every year. That happens every year. Bull was sitting there until the mid 40s one year. That's just how it plays out. If you could predict it perfectly, then they would have mastered that a long time ago. I don't know if that's a 2024 issue, but yeah, just that part was weird. It felt like they were kind of turning the whole thing into like a very scripted out little TV special with the second round, where it was like, these guys have cool stories, they're kind of interesting characters, so they get to come. Not Bronny wasn't there. Obviously, he probably never was going to be, but it was that part of it was just kind of like, what are we doing here? But if you just kind of, I don't know, honestly, it's background noise. I think most diehard NBA fans watch the draft through Twitter anyway. So it's not really for us, is it?
Oh, no, it's absolutely not for us. It is. I mean, it's for ESPN, I think, more than it is for anybody else. I think that's like number one.
Everything's behind. We don't know what player. If you were just watching the broadcast, I was texting a friend who's more of a casual fan and just kind of, likes the Suns, and that's that. She was like, I turned it off. This isn't helpful. It doesn't tell you anything. And Stephen A. Smith is talking a lot. Please make it end. And I was like, yeah, I don't blame you. Just have Twitter open and turn some music on.
Got to get some use out of Stephen to get that usage rate up before he signs this massive extension, that like number that's reportedly out there, Got to get ready. So he's like doing 4 hours after on ESPN.
AKA Josh Hart money, basically, is what Stephen A. Smith wants, which is hilarious in the grand scheme of things.
I love cross-matching those things. It's obviously not how like they're different industries, like everything like that, but it is funny to like cross-match those and realize like Stephen A. Smith is like the highest paid person, and he's paid like a really good role player in the NBA.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Other things, second-round pick swaps are hilarious and will never not be very funny to me that teams are like, we'll give you 46 in exchange for 2 pick swaps in the second round in like 4 years. I'm like, great. This is just like, what are we doing? Like, can we just pay cash? We used to pay cash in this country for draft picks, and now we're doing
Can't do it anymore. Second apron, no cash trades. The NBA doesn't want that anymore. The Bulls are sitting there crying. They were the kings of getting paid for their second-round picks. They're poor now. The NBA stole it from them.
Unbelievable stuff from the NBA. All right, coming up on today's show, we've got to react a little belatedly, but to the Knicks reuniting the Villanova Bros by trading for Mikal Bridges. We've got some Blazers and Wizards talk on what is going on with both those teams. Made an interesting trade involving Deni Avdija the other day. And Minnesota making the biggest swing of the entire draft. Plus, Zach Cohen, our NBA draft guy, coming through. Jam-packed episode of the Just Basketball Show. Let's go. Hey there, welcome to the Just Basketball Show, your 3 times a week show covering all things hoops. I'm Chris Manning, back here after a little bit of a time away. Brendon Kleen and Wes Goldberg held it down, and I'm with my guy Brennan today. If you haven't already, follow, rate, review on your podcast app platform of choice. Hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel, and check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and X. I want to tell you, too, that support for today's episode of the Just Basketball Show comes from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use code JustBasketball, and you'll get up to $1,500 in a first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Step 1, you download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using code JustBasketball. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager in any game. Step 3, you receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. Brendan, the big move this week in the NBA is the New York Knicks trading for Mikal Bridges, giving up 5 first-round picks, a first-round pick swap, Bojan Bogdanovic, and a future second-round pick. And Brooklyn gets these unprotected picks in 25, 27, 29, and 31. And the unprotected pick swap is in 2028. Brooklyn also receives a top 4 protected 2025 first-round pick via the Bucks and a 2025 second-rounder. The Knicks didn't just get Mikal Bridges, though. They got a 2026 second-round pick to really sweeten the pot and even out the pick allocation. But, Brennan, all joking aside, I really like this trade for the Knicks. And when you read the reporting on this after the fact and you think about what they could have done this summer, they were going to be more aware than anyone of what they could actually cash in all their chips for, right? Donovan Mitchell doesn't make sense from a basketball standpoint. It very much seems like we are imminently going to see him sign a 3+1 deal with Cleveland. I mean, this guy had input on the head coaching candidate, it seems like. So, I think that feels done. Joel Embiid doesn't seem like he's leaving Philadelphia. Giannis, things tough in Milwaukee. Maybe this changes in a year. But it doesn't feel like in the short to medium term that is exactly out there. And the Knicks, doing their work, say, okay, let's go get Mikal Bridges. Let's double down on the identity we had last year. Let's just get the Villanova thing even more dialed up. And I like this move. It's not getting an A-plus star like I think many people wanted, but they have the A-plus star already in Jalen Brunson. So why not go get another really high-end role guy who fits them perfectly? I really like this move.
Yeah, look, I think it's a big bet on exactly a lot of the things that we've seen work in the NBA lately, right? It hasn't been necessarily teams with 2 all-NBA players. Maybe Jaylen Brown should have made it, but even that's fringe third team. The Nuggets don't even have 2 All-Stars, let alone 2 All-NBA players. The Warriors, when they won it in 22. The Bucks before that. It's kind of the model. I guess to me, one, this is Rudy Gobert price close to it, at least on the pick side, not quite on the player side. There's no Walker Kessler in this deal or anything like that, but you are giving everything in order to make this move, and it is not a superstar, just like Gobert was not a superstar. But what we saw with Minnesota is that they were able to, Gobert basically locked into place the identity that they wanted to have, which was to control the paint, be massive everywhere, own the margins as far as, only allowing difficult shots, taking away easy shots, controlling the glass, controlling the turnover game, things like that. And they made a really deep run ahead of schedule this year. So it tracks, right? It tracks. But I guess to me, one of the things is just just using the Wolves, and there's other examples too, but just using the Wolves, right? Is Brunson the 1A you just called him? For sure. Are we positive that's what he is? Do we know that through 4 playoff rounds and 16 playoff wins, that is what he will be for you? We have a couple of years of evidence that makes you feel pretty good about it, but
this would be a good draft, Brennan, to say like, hey, we haven't. This is like maybe for August as we start proving the season. Guys who haven't proven they're 1A guys yet, let's draft who we think could get there. I would Brunson. If we did that as an exercise, or I think about the names percolating in my head now, he's very high up on that list of guys that haven't gone all the way yet. He would just. I'm in love. I think everyone in basketball kind of is right now. But so maybe it's
first pick Jason Tatum, right?
Yeah, he hasn't done it. Jaylen Brown did it. The Celtics system did it, and he's still 19, so we got time.
Can't wait to see if Tatum can get there eventually. But Brunson, is he that, right? And then the other one is, okay, great. Let's say lock that in. Let's say yes. Well, is anybody else good enough to be as good as Brown, as good as Middleton was that year, or Holiday, whichever player you kind of think of as being that for them, or Andrew Wiggins, I guess, in 2022. I don't know, Draymond Green, whatever you want to say, but that's the question, right? Is the sum of the parts actually going to be, and it is a risk. It is kind of betting on your culture and your structure a lot more than, in a way, just trading everything for a legit surefire star is kind of the easy way out, even though it's painful to give up all those assets because you're just kind of throwing talent at the problem. This is a different kind of bet, and it's going to be a lot more fun to watch than if it was just Donovan Mitchell and a bunch of your turn, my turn. This is going to be about, can that chemistry, can that familiarity, and sort of the fitting of everything together click into place at a level that makes them even better than they were. So it's kind of why we like all this stuff in the first place, whether it's just basketball or like all the sports. So I'm all in, but it's not a lock that this is going to just work perfectly. And if it doesn't, they're running out of options very quickly if they're not out already.
Yeah, it's not a lock to work, but I like the idea. I like the boldness. I like the concept of what we're going to see. I mean, the lineups that I could see next year where it's, we'll see if they, maybe how small they want to play. They have obviously this year were so tied into Hartenstein and Robinson, and that's kind of been a big thing for them the last couple of years even, right? But this year, could we see Brunson, DiVincenzo, Hart, Anunoby, Bridges as a 5 and say, hey, it's going to be small, but, OG is going to guard smaller 5s, or Bridges will guard a smaller 5. We're going to be spaced out. Like, yeah, I'm just...
Anunoby
guards smaller
Bridges
5s.
is lucky if you're getting him to guard all types of 4s. I'll point you to the 2022 second round of the NBA playoffs where
fair enough.
A 1 named Luka Doncic was a little too physical for him to handle. So centers maybe not so much.
He's a 1 with 2 seeds, like he's a thick 1.
Yeah, he's a thick 1, but I would say he's still substantially smaller than, let's say,
Hart.
Joel Embiid or Kristaps Porzingis.
Josh Hart, you are guarding 4s, and Mikal Bridges is guarding, the 3 or the point of attack guy or something.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But they're going to
Anunoby can handle all the big dudes.
Yeah, but they're going to be playing big. Or Randall. Well, we'll get to him. But they can play small with these guys and be spaced out and fit this identity that got them in a certain place. And it's not like Bogdanovich gave them anything either. So it's like I understand that you traded for him. Yeah, that's just money. It's like he's old. It doesn't feel like I don't know what he's giving anyone. Really going forward, maybe he's a buyout guy now. We'll see, but
yeah, I believe he was potentially could be. He was guaranteed for not even a full contract, so they might have been going into a summer not even having him on the team. So yeah, that's a good use of it, right? He's just salary at that point. They want to win,
and I do, Brennan, on its face. I like I like at least what this can throw at Boston. At the very least, I think in theory, I like what this can throw at Boston. Throwing all these wings at them, throwing this style at them. There's stuff to figure out still for sure. Tibbs' coaching of this team is going to be fascinating. It seems like he's going to get an extension as well as via Mark Stein. How he manages the rotation, how hard he pushes some of these guys, all of the stuff will be really interesting. But I like in theory at least how this looks against Boston. And I just like teams going for it. It's certainly not guaranteed to work. There's a lot to figure out here. Randall, there's health concerns always, I think, with some of the guys they have. But I like this at least on its face.
Well, let's talk about if it'll work, and let's talk about Boston specifically, because you've heard from every NBA insider under the sun this week that was the thinking here, right? Was watching what the Celtics just did in terms of being big at every position, being versatile at every position, being physically overwhelming at every position in different ways. And this isn't the Knicks trying to match that. And I think their starting lineup, is it fair to say, will probably be huge. I think Bridges will probably start at the 2, and you go, at least given what the roster looks like on June 27th here, again, after the second round, it's Anunoby at the 3, probably Randall at the 4, and then whatever centers they end up with at the 5. It sounds pretty nice. We can talk about that center spot because it's still up in the air. But
yeah, they got some names linked to them already. Valanciunas, Drummond, Batadze, Nick Richards. Like those are the names.
And not a lock that they don't keep Hartenstein. It doesn't sound likely, but nobody has said that they will not keep him, and we haven't heard he's going to another team. So, but they'll have Robinson probably. Randall can be there as an option, Anunoby in a small ball situation. Mm-hmm. It makes sense. And honestly, the thing about the Bridges part of this in particular that is maybe the best part of it to me, I'm not sold that he is actually going to be able to be a secondary offensive creator that really changes much for them compared to what they've looked like already, if I'm being honest. But I think he's a great shooter. They didn't have a lot of that, even though it felt like it in some games. They were kind of saved by DiVincenzo taking like 18 a night and being just a one-man floor spacing situation, but they didn't have a lot, so that's good. He's better than a lot of other players in that capacity, but I don't think he's raising their ceiling too much on that end. And that, honestly, to me, is part of the case for keeping Randall. But what I like about it, and what I think we kind of lost sight of with the Knicks is, throughout that whole run, their defensive rating went down almost 10 points per 100 possessions from the regular season to the postseason. They allowed 123.9 points per 100 possessions in the playoffs. This was a bad defensive team in the postseason. They just didn't have enough to take away the paint. And, of course, everything comes back to the injuries for them, of course. But they didn't rebound well. They allowed a high percentage, again, at the rim as a defense. They didn't create turnovers. They didn't take care of their fouls. They did nothing well. They were a bad defensive team. And I think that a lot locks into place when, instead of Miles McBride or Dante DiVincenzo kind of trying his best to be your number one point of attack defender, that's Mikal Bridges. OG Anunoby is guarding the Luka types, the Tatum types, the Brown types, whatever that matchup looks like. You're able to hide Brunson a lot more easily instead of, what we saw the Pacers and other teams doing, just picking at that over and over, and honestly, Maxey too. You have rim protection, hopefully, if you can stay a little bit healthier. You have Achua, who we haven't mentioned, who probably, fits in here somewhere, hopefully, if they can keep him as another switchable option, another center option. So I think that this was in large part about defense, if probably more than offense.
Can I ask you one thing about this, and it's from a value standpoint, Brendan, because I was thinking about this as well. Like, obviously, this was the cost. Bridges has been rumored to be a 4 first-round pick guy for a while, and that was what was offered, right? Yeah. You get whether you think that's worth it or where he is or not.
Yeah.
This is what the market ended up being.
Mm-hmm.
They give up this for him, and they give OG after some consternation, some leakage to maybe like nudge that price up. It seems like in retrospect.
Yeah. Which
200 fair.
Go
That's
off.
how this works.
Go off, King. Yeah.
Helps his Leon Rose and used to work CA, OG's a CA guy. His son, his agent, I believe, is Leon Rose's son. So I'm sure it wasn't probably that hard ultimately. Did we need all this? Open question. But $212 million for OG.
Yeah.
The picks they gave up for Bridges. What do you make of a team like the Knicks, just from a value standpoint, going this route and just diving fully deep in, just from what it's costing to do so? Like, what do you make of that specific angle of it?
You're talking about the trades or how expensive
Like
the team is?
just
Cost from what standpoint?
Expensive, and I think the picks are built in the expense because first round picks you'll get whenever of the year because the Stepien rule. But like the first round picks we're seeing with the Wolves, like that is a way to continually. That is a continually way to maybe get some cheap labor, keep costs of your roster in check with the second apron with all this stuff. And when I'm thinking about this, I think they must. My read on that is they must feel super confident they can push Boston to be this aggressive and pay what that costs. Like that's really what I think when I'm reading about this is like I still think Boston's the favorite in the East. I don't even know exactly where I would have the Knicks shed in the pecking order. We'll see how the offseason shakes out.
Well, that's what you're supposed to be answering,
right? No, but I'm talking through it. We're getting there. If I'm saying let's assume Philly makes some big moves, I think they're probably going to end up. I could see the Knicks as like my third favorite team in the East, right? I think that feels like where this might end up. Maybe 2 in the regular season, just from hey, Embiid plays 50 games kind of thing, whatever. And if it's like Brandon Ingram, I could, and for Philly and not Paul George, which that seems like where this might be headed, I would maybe favor the Knicks over them in that case. But I think they must look at this and say, we believe in this situation that teams are not repeating. We don't really believe Boston's a dynasty as good as they were last year and how they won the finals. I'm reading this as saying, I think the Knicks believe that they can beat Boston if they actually get a shot to do it. That's how I'm reading this. It's just they're saying F the cost, F the picks. I think they face an uphill battle with a couple different angles. I think Boston is just better. I think their system is a little bit better. I think Boston's offense will just be better. But Boston has some weaknesses. And I think just saying we're going to give ourselves a shot to push that, I think that's valid, and I think it's there. Is it like a little more than I would want to pay, even if I am the Knicks? Yes. Do I understand it ultimately? Because you see a window and you see the way the league is working right now where there is parity. I think that's also entirely valid and fair.
Okay, so on the value side, I hear you. It's a lot. They're not expensive in the grand scheme of things, and they haven't gotten rid of all their assets. So, if I'm comparing it to the other teams in the league, it's not quite
like the Wolves or the Sun, like some of these other teams that have had to go down this road.
No, I mean, as of right now, we talked about Precious and Hartenstein, who are free agents, and we'll see if they are able to keep either one of them. But right now, without those two guys and without an actual contract on the books, I guess there's a hold on the books for the guy they selected in the first round, but there's $6 million under the first apron. And there's 17 under the second apron. So they're still pretty flexible. They're not really hamstrung by a lot of those rules as of yet. And they still have another Mavs pick that they are owed. They have their own future picks in the even years. They didn't do and we're going to give you all these swaps things like, the Suns did with Durant and the Wolves did with Gobert. So they're not done. And, we probably don't have time to hit the Randall angle of this right now. We'll have another episode coming, but there's still some moves to be made there. The problem is they were kind of running out of players that they could trade outside of Randall and Robinson because they just like everybody on their roster, and that part of their strength is their depth, so you don't want to mess with that. But they still have a couple moves to make. So I think value-wise, it's a lot for Bridges in a vacuum, but part of why you're comfortable doing that is because you have the other stuff. The Boston side of it, I think that I agree with you. This team, we talked actually, I don't remember if it was you and I or or me and Wes, but we talked about how you beat the Celtics, and I pointed to the Nuggets and kind of agreed, and Milwaukee, frankly, with Giannis. And it was like, well, you want to have a player who is big enough and great enough to kind of take advantage of what they might be a little weaker at, which is that, their rim protection is a lot of the time a group effort. Their, rebounding can be that way. They take a lot of threes, but, if you're able to get to the basket a ton and get out and transition a ton, then 2 is still an easier, way to guarantee yourself some points than 3 and whatever. And I don't think the Knicks have that. I think the Knicks, in trying to be like the Celtics, are almost too much like the Celtics, and they don't have that spaced out 5 to really put the cherry on top of all of it. So maybe they're like the Celtics when they still had Horford and Williams, more so than the Porzingis version, right? So,
which was Brunson a very good team.
is a weak link on defense in a way that Boston doesn't have. So, yeah, I think I would put them a peg below as of now, but we haven't seen them play. And again, it's a bet on cohesion and chemistry, and that, whatever was going on in Pennsylvania is going to cook something special up here.
Last thing is Jalen Brunson could be extended this summer.
So could Bridges, for what it's worth. Which is part of, to me, frankly, why I don't think saying he was been worth 4 first-rounders. Well, that was when he had 3 years left on maybe one of the best contracts in the NBA. Now he only has 2, and they might be locking themselves into being the team to pay him the next contract, which is going to be what he's actually worth, not what he got blocked in at by the Suns before he hit free agency. So that's part of the value side of it too, where he probably will be making something close to what OG is before long.
Yeah, and Brunson, if he waits a year, could make $270 million. If it's like in the 150s, I believe, if he signs this summer. So what he does will be interesting. He could push this out, but that's coming soon. That one has to get done, just from a pecking order standpoint before Bridges, I think, and also like contractually he is up sooner than Bridges. We have some Julius Randle thoughts we'll get to, but we're running long. We're gonna punt on that, and we'll come back to maybe some big offseason questions and team
Who knows? He might not be a Knick by the time we talk Knicks. So
yeah, and we can talk
about
what
might force it in there.
We can talk about him and like Isaiah Collier with the Jazz or something.
There we go.
Talk about the Blazers, Brendan. If I liked the Knicks trade, I am a little bit befuddled by one particular aspect of this Blazers trade. Are we sure? What's up with 2 firsts for Deni Avdija? Like 2 and a second and some seconds. Like that many. I like Avdija. I thought he was a good buy low candidate for a good team. Portland's not particularly a good team. One of the longest odds to win the title next year, if not the longest right now, from BetMGM. This just feels like a little steep for a move that I'm not exactly sure why they did. Even if I like Avdija as a player, believe that there's something there that a change of scenery could be good for him. But the value to me feels really off. The Wizards, to me, did good work in this trade more than Portland did.
Sure. Well, because the Wizards they didn't care about what it took on Portland's side because money, not as big of an obstacle for them, and they're in full rebuild mode. So agreed on the Washington side of it. Portland did this because they paid 1 first-round pick for Avdija, maybe 1 first and 2 seconds for Avdija, whatever way you want to look at it. They paid another first to lower their tax bill and get out of the luxury tax because they're a bad team that's really expensive. So the part of this value was about the finances. I think we get lost when we know what that looks like when the trade is purely a dump. This was kind of a hedge. It was a little bit of acquiring a talent, a little bit of a dump, but the final price for Portland is enough to do both, and that's what happened here. So they get rid of Brogdon, who somehow was making $23 million. We joked at the beginning of the episode about Josh Hart money. Malcolm Brogdon, I believe, would be the 3rd highest paid player on the Knicks behind OG's new contract and Brunson.
Awesome for Malcolm Brogdon. Really good for him.
Absolutely insane that happened.
I had a friend text me when this trade went through. It's like, could Brogdon be like a buyout guy? And he's like thinking about him as like a Cavs, which whatever. Veteran wise, don't hate it, but like, why? If you're him, it's like, yes, you want to play for stuff, but like I'm only doing the buyout if I can keep like mid 20 of the 23 million or something absurd. You know what I mean? It's like I let me get that full bag because whatever next contract this guy signs will not be worth nearly this.
No, and so, yeah, I mean, that's why they did it. That's why they had to give so much. Now, I think you could make a case it's still an overpay.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it's an overpay. Like, this should have been 1 first and maybe some seconds, and we call it a day. This didn't need to be 2. Like, what the Wizards doing, like, the heisting of teams, Brendan, is a weird thing that has happened to us. I can't think of the last time this happened.
No, I mean they're smart for now. We'll see, but for right now, their owner is
now,
giving their front office some leeway, right? It's like the opposite of the new owner syndrome. It's like the new general manager syndrome, where you get to do smart things for a little while before the big man takes back over.
Yeah.
But yeah, then look, the difference is part of why I think it's an overpay, right? Is that Brogdon, they didn't just purely dump him into Washington's like cap space. The Wizards don't. I don't know if they have enough to do that full out. So the difference in salary was like $8.5 million. So That's the part of it where I get a little bit confused. You're paying that much to get a difference of $8 million in salary. You probably could have maybe done both of these things at once if you really wanted Deni, trade somebody else for him, maybe Robert Williams or something, and then figure out a way to dump Brogdon, and maybe you don't have to pay as much if it's not all one deal. But whatever. I like Avdija for the Blazers, so maybe that's just the bottom line of all of it. And they needed a wing. They needed to get more experienced and bigger at that position. They did it here. I think he's a perfect glue guy. I think he's a perfect guy to play next to other great guards, which they hope that Scoot and Shaden and potentially Simons will be. So it's not a bad player acquisition, but Portland seems to have gotten outsmarted by, like you said, somehow the Washington Wizards.
And the Wizards, I like the work they've done. Yes, do I really know? Yes, is this still a year, 2 years, 3 years off? Yes, but friend Alex Sarr, who they get at number 2, taking Bub Carrington out of Pitt, who was one of the highest risers of this draft, thought was maybe in the 20-ish range, ends up going 14th. Really young guy that they can develop. You have Balak Coulibaly. You're going to tank this year. This is one of the teams that I think is going to want to be in the Cooper Flag running next year. There's no question that this is a team that wants to be bad enough to draft Cooper Flag next year. They have accomplished that. They got some more picks out of it to get more shots at lottery tickets or make a trade down the line if they want to. And they got some guys that I think have high upside, even if it's going to take some work to get them there. And it's going to be bad this year. This team's going to be hard to watch and stinky and all this stuff this year. But I'd like this first step. I'm a fan of this side of the deal much more than I am the Portland side.
Okay, so question before we move off this deal. Is Anthony Simons available now?
He should be.
Where do you like him, and how much could he cost? The obvious answer that I've heard the most as people have speculated about this is a little bit further down the East Coast in a city called Orlando. And I think that would be awesome.
What is it? 2 firsts?
Yeah, it's very fascinating, right? Because Simons is in this weird position where he's already gotten paid, but we don't really think of him as being. I mean, he was in was it the 2018 draft? He's been around for a very long time. He's 2 years into his second contract already, but he just came into the NBA so young, and he didn't play because he was right out of high school. He had the IMG thing. So what does that all end up? A player who's still kind of a little bit raw, but also expensive already, and you don't know what he looks like on a great team. You don't know what he looks like, right? So
yeah.
I wouldn't be willing to go bigger than 2 first. Yeah. That's for sure. But then it's which players and everything else.
I think ideally you'd want to be like one unprotected and then like a protected is kind of where I'd want. So if it really works out, then it's like you at least have some risk coverage there. Because he does it 2 years left on his deal. If you sign him, you're immediately starting to start collecting data and figure out, okay, do we extend this guy? How does he fit with our core? Orlando in particular would be throwing him in with Franz and Paolo and what they're going to do and trying to evaluate that. I like the Orlando. I think Orlando would probably be my favorite one. Trying to run through I would have maybe said Houston if they wanted to get do something, but they take Reed Shepherd, they have Jalen Green already. It seems like if they're gonna do anything weird, it's gonna be trading Sengun this summer, which some team that's weird. Trying to think of good teams for him. It's not just hey, let's move him to Utah, let's move him to Detroit, right? I'm trying to think of good team. Would you prefer let me ask you this hypothetical. If you're Philly, how would you feel about Simons at his cost versus a Brandon Ingram, if that's kind of where you end up in? I know him and Maxey, I don't think it's perfect. So is that good? But it's lower cost. You could have other money to get more role guys. How would you feel about the Philly part of it?
No, I think what you said about Maxey is they're too similar. They're both at the very least, a little bit undersized physically to play elite defense. If not in Simon's case, probably a true negative on that end of the court so far in his career. So I don't love that. I mean, the thing with Simons is he's a little big for a guard, but he's also not physically, muscular and forceful with how he plays on either end all the time. And he's a little more crafty, a little more kind of, shake and bake as an offensive player. Not so. No, probably not a fit with Maxey, but How about New Orleans in the McCollum spot?
I love that. Swap him out, get a little bit younger. I like that. I think New Orleans or Orlando would be the two as I'm thinking about it. Those are kind of the two. Maybe like the other one that I would say, just if things get weird for them and they don't want to take a big step back, and maybe Joe Cronin can't do business with this team, but just due to weird energy. But Miami, what if Miami like resets the summer? Jimmy gets traded. They just don't want to take a step back. That feels like a guy that maybe they would just say, yeah, sure,
Maybe
salary.
him and Hero.
Yeah,
Not a great fit.
I just don't know how much I'm caring about Tyler Hero. Like how, like I'm also trying to.
But he's
figure out
on your team, right?
I know.
So
I'm
it's
just probably also trying to trade Tyler Hero. Is kind of where I'm at. But that's
yeah. If he's replacing Hero, for sure, I could see it. Yeah, it's interesting. We're getting to a point where not a lot of teams don't already have their primary playmaker. So is he better than the players that teams already have, or can he fit next to somebody else? That's kind of, it starts to get pretty limited, and I think that's, not to get off track, but just as a comparison point, that's what Atlanta's looking at, I think, a little bit as well, where we don't really love our guys being in the same backcourt in Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, but great. Who wants them? Nobody?
Cavs too, and they got to. I mean, they got to find a. It seems like they want to maybe find a Garland deal, and
yeah. So Spurs, obviously, we should throw out, right? I mean, but I think Garland, a more traditional point guard, makes more sense for them because they have a lot of shot-happy players on their roster already. So Simons, who's, a little bit of a score first versus a pass first, although I think his passing is underrated, probably doesn't make sense for them. So yeah, it's a tough fit.
Garland's also, I think, the guy in a vacuum, like not thinking about salary and fit totally. He's the guy I think I'd want first out of the guys that, like, if it's Murray, if it's Simons, if it's Garland, I think I'd want Garland. Garland would be the first guy I'd want off that list.
What about Garland versus Trae?
I mean, Trae's more talented. Trae's a bigger star. Trae's a better passer. Like Trae's better, but I don't know how thrilled I am to be in the Trae Young business to some degree.
Garland's younger too, and a little bit of an easier fit. So I probably would lean Garland if I was just kind of in a vacuum trying to build out my team because he's just a little more. He's easier to fit in. I mean, they're both small, so it's not like one of them really has an advantage there. And I think Garland at least competes on defense. So, yeah, probably by a hair. But Trae definitely second above these other guys we're talking about. I mean, the rumors of the Hawks being able to get more for Trae than they did, or more for Murray than they would for Trae, feels like lunacy. I don't really know if people have been watching DeJounte Murray the past couple of years.
I love lying season, Brendan. And we're in lying. We're just in lying.
I don't know. We'll see, right? But it kind of feels like that. It kind of feels like that's true, but it's not even so much a Trae thing to me with that. It's like DeJounte Murray hasn't played a style that I would describe as like really winning basketball, even as his team theoretically was trying to win basketball games since he got to Atlanta. And I don't, which kind of adds up to like we've never really seen it because with the Spurs he didn't have to. So I don't know. That one's weird. Simon's market will definitely be connected to those guys, but just a thought experiment.
All right, last one we're going to head into before we get to Zach Cohen. The Minnesota Timberwolves, did they make the right swing? They trade up to number 8, get Rob Dillingham instead of the San Antonio Spurs. Traded with the Spurs. Spurs get a 2031 unprotected first and a 2030 top 1 protected pick swap from the Timberwolves. Brendan, what do you think of this deal? Where's your head at with the Rob Dillingham to Minnesota deal?
Yeah, I mean, my tweet on this went around a little bit last night. Minnesota fans were like, Tim Connolly, chestnut checkers, which was hilarious, as if I'm like some kind of Wolves fan that was pumping them up after.
I mean, you are like number 1 Rudy Gobert trade supporter guy that I know in my life, so kind of true.
I mean, everybody caught up to me this spring, though, right? I mean, are we still?
Nah. You were light years ahead of that.
I'm happy to be first, but are there still like Wolves haters? I mean, I feel like everybody kind of got on board. They were like the most entertaining thing in the postseason, while everything else sucked.
Everyone got on Ant. I don't think everyone necessarily got on like embracing Rudy Gobert.
Look, I will again make the distinction. I do not love Rudy Gobert. I just think the trade was never as bad as everyone claimed that it was. That's it. But on this trade, the chestnut checkers aspect of it that got Wolves fans hyped on draft night on Wednesday was me pointing out, and honestly, me calling this like a loophole is a little bit of an exaggeration, I would say. It's not as if it's this out-of-the-box crazy, no one could have ever thought of it thing, but it is a little bit of a loophole in that basically this trade, Chris, by going just so high on the price to acquire the 8th overall pick in this draft and go get somebody like Rob Dillingham, the Wolves had no other avenues to get a player that makes as much money or is as highly valued in that he's young and talented as Dillingham. There's no way. They are a second-apron team. In the free agent market, they're only able to use minimum contracts. There's some world in which, some fans were pulling back at me and saying, like, well, we could have re-signed like Kyle Anderson and traded him, and that would open up a salary slot. And it's like, honestly, good luck. I don't think that was going to happen. So, and is the player you're getting as good as Dillingham? Probably not. So, from a value standpoint, from a being up against it and trying to deal with all of those limitations that the CBA has kind of put on teams and still getting a great player, I kind of have no choice but to tip my cap to Connolly. But obviously, what those picks end up becoming, how high they are, all that we'll find out when we're all much older, and if Dillingham hits or not, we'll see that as well. So I don't know. What do you think? Did you like Dillingham? Do you think he is going to be able to hold up in the NBA? Is he the right kind of player for them to go get, given what they needed?
I think I would have probably preferred they use this on some kind of wing who's a little bit bigger. I just think doubling down on that, to me, makes some sense, right? Like, I think getting someone else there, maybe like you're thinking a Kyle Anderson successor, to me would have made a little more sense.
Okay. So, point guard in that world?
But that's the thing, right? It's like, do you need a Mike Conley succession plan at some point? You're not really going to be a team that can trade for like an expensive point guard on the market. Like, you can't be the Garland team. You can't be the DeJounte team, right? Like, it doesn't really, unless you're trading Gobert or trading Cat, which doesn't seem like it's happening imminently, particularly with Cat. I don't think like that was really out there, right? Like, in a veteran minimum guy is like a stopgap thing for this team. So like taking Dillingham and saying, okay, we have time with Conley and Ant to bring him along slowly. We need to get talent. Maybe the cost this year for a talent who had a weird year at Kentucky, who is really young, one of the younger guys in this draft, obviously at 19 in a draft that's skewed a little bit older. That part to me makes a ton of sense, where it's like, okay, we can maybe find ways to contribute year one. We don't need him to be a starter from day one, but it's a chance for us to get talent and maybe another first out the door for them at this point is just like, sure, whatever. Like, it's like
and they're so far out that it's like they kept their pick this year and they got Terrence Shannon, which was kind of nice too, to not have they care about now for the draft and for these trades. So it kind of made sense to actually go out that far. I feel like we always think that's worse, but kind of made more sense
for the Wolves. It's like, you figure it out, and you have Ant, and you kind of figure like you can maybe like you have him and Jaden, and you can like try to like, and these guys take care of some of the long term concerns with that. So like I get it. I think Dillingham and Shannon as picks in this draft make tons of sense as far as trying to rebuild your guard rotation, get a little bit younger, get some more offensive juice at those guard spots, but not something you need to solve right now. Like, next year is still going to be Mike Conley's the point guard of your team, but a year from now is Dillingham the starter on your team. Can Shannon
not to mention, they have Nickeil Alexander-Walker still in the mix as well. He had a breakout postseason. I don't know if he's quite a point guard, but he's a playmaking option for you that can dribble and kind of be part of that. And then I think they would hope that Jaden McDaniels has a little bit more scoring punch and creation punch to him over time. So I think, to me, Dillingham is like one of the players they hope can elevate the ceiling of their offense now and in potentially like a post-Cat environment. But I guess one thing is they're definitely a team that's big enough to
absorb
take on. Exactly. The same way they have been with Conley. Now, Conley's a better defender and he's a vet and everything else, but they could, of any team in the NBA, to take on a weak link size-wise and defense-wise, the biggest, most intense defensive supporting cast in the NBA with the star player who's actually like a plus on that end, and Ant. that's the type of team that should be taking the risk. So from a fit standpoint, we never would have been talking about Minnesota as a Dillingham fit because why would we?
Why would
but
we?
It works. Right. But it works. So for him, I love it. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a situation in the NBA where Dillingham was more likely to develop than this. It's just from their standpoint, there's a whole lot more pressure on it to actually break that way now.
And look, good on them for what this costs. I mean, Bobby Marks had this. Their tax bill goes from $56 to $84 million with the addition of with Dillingham's rookie salary. So the rookie salary
they traded away a guy with a pick in the second round on Thursday to start to dip into that, right? So it shows how much you feel it.
Yeah, you feel this eminently, like, and even with the cheap contract on the books, like, you still have these other payments. Like, this isn't like a cheap expenditure to do this. So good for them for going for this. I like that they did this to build this roster and not just say, we're going to go old, we're going to go veteran, we're going to get our version of signing Reggie Jackson or something like that. Like, they are thinking not just about next year, but for the future. And I love when the best teams in the league are not just kind of doubling down and staying too much in the present. The Wolves are thinking about what's to come, and I think that's really smart when you have Ant and who has such a long runway.
Big losers, Dallas, Minnesota, or Dallas, Denver, Phoenix, any of the older teams in the West that didn't just get a lot better. Minnesota and Oklahoma City are fucking coming, and they're better now. So good luck to everyone else, because those two teams added a lot here, and they were already pretty damn good.
We'll get to this with Zach, I'm sure, but I got to just say, I love the Thunder. They trade for Alex Caruso, who, like, I saw memes going around that he's the most Oklahoma City Thunder-looking player of all time because he's like a white guy with a ball cap and like a thick mustache right now. Just like, yeah, that's true. And then they also take Topic, and it's just like, of course, they just like take Topic and get to sit him for a year. It's like they are. Sam Presti's a madman, an absolute fucking madman, and I love it. All right, let's get to Zach Cohen, talk more NBA draft. That's coming up now. Zach, let's start winners and losers here in the NBA draft. Give me your favorite winner, your biggest winner.
I mean, I'm sure you know I'm going there with this because I've been high on Kyle Filipowski on this show. I think that the Jazz did better than anybody in this draft, honestly. I think that Cody Williams is a player that I had in my top 5. You get Isaiah Collier all the way down at 29. I think you get him in an infrastructure that can get the best out of him. We saw them, get something similar out of Colin Sexton. I think the players are not that different in terms of just pedigree. And I think that Kyle Filipowski, the second round, a player that I had in my top 20, the same team that got the most out of Lauri Markkanen. I just think that these guys are ending up in the best possible spot for them. And I think that the Jazz kind of deserved it for being a team that has not tanked outright.
Yeah, I really like their draft. I mean, just now you look at the young guys they have in their team: Cody Williams, Collier, Filipowski, Taylor Hendricks, Colin Sexton, Keontae George. I'm gonna refrain. There's a guy, Kessler, and Lauri Markkanen. I'm gonna throw as like the head guy in there, and then you throw in, like they have two, like, for me, like, internet kind of famous guys. They have Kenneth Lofton, who lost a bunch of weight this summer, on a 2-way. They have Jason Preston on a 2-way. Like, and they have a bunch more picks to come. I love the way they have reloaded post Gobert, post Mitchell, and like this is in a bad draft, quote unquote bad draft. Like, I love the talent bets they made with these 3 guys.
Yeah, I think with Utah, it's interesting, right? I mean, like, the part that do you think that George and Collier can play together, Zach, or do you think it's kind of like one of them will hit? We'll see which one it is.
I mean, it's a situation where, like, it's not that different from the Suns for me, where it's like you have 2 guys that can play on the ball, but neither one of them is a pure point guard. But you make up for it in kind of collective team players where enough guys can make passes and run offense where you don't need the one on-ball initiator running the show. I think that those guys can play together in that sense. I think maybe one of them does have to come off the bench long term. Who knows? I mean, George is obviously a proven player at this point. He had a really good rookie season. Collier, you have no idea what you're going to get. But I think that you took a talent swing. If they can play together, they can. If they can't, it isn't the biggest deal in the world.
All right. Can I throw a team out there and we discuss if they were a winner or a loser?
Let's do it.
What did you think of OKC's draft night, Zach? I know you love Nikola Topic, so I'm interested in your thoughts on him in that environment. But the other stuff they did was pretty surprising, as always, with the Thunder. Dylan Jones at 26, which they traded up kind of out of nowhere to come take, a guy that some people had, I believe, a lot of the big draft people had in the 60s. and then did it a couple more times throughout the second round. What do you think of their haul and how Topic kind of fits in there?
I mean, I loved it for him because I had Topic as my number one player. So you just getting him where they got him. I obviously, like, it's a team that is trying to win right now, so it kind of hurts to have to wait a full year for him. But at the same time, like, this is the team that just sat Chet Holmgren for an entire season, got him right. You're probably happy if you're Topic knowing that they're just going to take care of you from a health perspective, and apparently one of the best medical staffs in the league. And I do think that Topic is going to be able to learn a lot of things from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as another, plus-sized oddball initiator that can score in a lot of different ways, that can score at the basket. So I think that eventually they're going to have a huge winner in Topic, and I'm not really high on Dylan Jones. I just kind of don't really see the pathway towards him being a great NBA player without a jumper, just as an undersized forward that, has a lot of other abilities. It's hard for me to get on board with guys like that. But at the same time, I really liked AJ Mitchell. So I thought that in the second round, they got another guy that's another big guard. I mean, they just load up on these guys. They don't seem to care how many of them they have. And I think it's a pretty smart strategy. So they got Giddey out of the building, but they replaced him with two other really, big guys that fit their scheme. They really never have a guy on the floor that can't create for themselves and others and has size on the court.
Yeah, I mean, they're keeping the churn going, right? It's like they get Giddey out. They elect to not pay Giddey. They bring in Caruso. They probably maybe extend Caruso. But they got better, and they still have developmental prospects and time, including a guy that many people, Zach, including yourself, have rated much higher than where he got drafted. And he might have gone, it probably goes higher if not for this ACL. So, I love this. To me, they are a winner just from the structure. Particularly if you just include the context of the Giddey trade on top of this, I think, to me, they're a clear winner.
What do you? I hate to put you on the spot because it's a pretty far down guy, but do you have a general comp for Dylan Jones? I've been wondering what even. At first, I was like, is it Talen Horton-Tucker? But I don't think he's that much of a point guard kind of guy. I think the Ringer has Grant Williams, Julius Randle, type of style of player. What do you think?
I don't know. I thought he was a little like Josh Hardy. I mean, he's a bit heavier than that, but I don't know. It's hard for me to say what he's going to be in the NBA because I do think just an undersized big like that needs to be able to shoot the ball a little bit. I was really surprised to see him go in the first round. I had him pretty firm second rounder.
Mm-hmm. All right, you want to go a loser? What do you got as far as a team whose draft you did not understand?
Oh man, I didn't like that the Spurs traded out of 8. But at the same time, I liked the collection of talent they got, so I'm not going to put him as a loser. I think that my loser, honestly, was the Grizzlies. I just thought that they panicked a little bit when they were not able to get Donovan Clingan, and they reached a little bit on Zach Edey, who I don't think is as tailor-made of a fit there. I think that Edey is going to be able to play right away because I think he's a really good offensive player. He obviously has massive size. He's going to get to the NBA and still be one of the biggest guys on the court, but I don't think he's there defensively. I think that they really kind of panicked when they didn't get Clingan. I think Clingan landed in a really good spot, and I think that Clingan, you saw some pre-draft workout videos come out after he was drafted. Man, he was shooting the 3-ball really well. So I think that that's going to be a part of his game in the NBA.
Yeah, curious. I two things about that. Number one, I'm curious to see what didn't happen. What was? I haven't seen the reporting, so maybe there is some that I've just missed. But I'm kind of curious to see why Memphis couldn't get up. What was there a cost they didn't want to pay? Was whatever it was. I'm just kind of curious about how that didn't happen for them. The Edey thing, I also agree with. It's he's not as mobile. He's bigger, obviously, because he's huge, but a little more. I mean, a little more of an uncertain of what exactly this is going to look like. Clingan, you could have just seen being awesome right away for a team that I think we think could win a ton of games next year, get back on track. Edey's not that exact thing. There's probably more built-in growing pains there for a team that I think wants to hit the ground running. Him also just that kind of center. Potentially running, having to catch up with John Morant just feels weird to me. Just the pace of how he wants to play as a 5 when you have Morant as your lead engine just feels a little bit off to me. Yeah,
Zach, how would you use Edey in the NBA on offense? Honestly, kind of separate from the Grizzlies. Just what is he going to play like? How is he even going to work? Because the defense, we can kind of envision it. We've seen Boban out there. We kind of know the limitations of what's going on. But offensively, how would you deploy him to try to maximize what he can be?
I mean, I think you've seen a lot of comparisons to Jonas Valanciunas and Ivica Zubac. I think that those are two guys that it'll be somewhat similar. I mean, I don't think you want to really run a lot of offense through a traditional center anymore, but I do think that with Edey, you're going to have to. So I think that when he's on the court, you're going to get him some touches early in the shot clock and let him go to work. And if he doesn't have it, he'll kick it out. But I do think that he's a guy that you're going to have to kind of get him some touches and really kind of change your offense around him. So I'm interested in seeing what that looks like with Memphis. I would say, I do think that they have the right offensive coach to do it. I think that I trust him to build something that works there. But I agree, Edey running with Morant offensively sounds pretty rough as a fit. And I also think defensively, just getting back, they could be killed in transition between Ja's, carelessness defensively and then Edey just not being back.
We did at least, I will say, get a good piece of Ja Morant content out of this. Where I don't know if you guys saw this, where he posted on his Instagram story the meme of the guy looking up the really tall guy. Ja Morant's at least gonna have fun with this. So
I believe it was from Rush Hour. Yeah, I think Zach Edey, to me, the part of the thing that I never understood, especially as high as he was being mocked, even if you believe in his talent, it felt like even the best, most fervent believers in him were he's probably a 20-minute per game guy, and so it's to cap yourself at the level of impact just from a role standpoint that a player you're taking at 9 can have is where it became a little bit confusing. I sort of saw it from a Miami standpoint, given that they play a lot of zone and they play slower and things like that, and they want to have that defense first mentality. Whereas at 9, it's the best version of him. I know it's a weak draft, but that's asking a lot for him to make you feel good about that pick, even in a weaker year. One more loser that I had, and then I want to jump back to the positive, and Chris, you can maybe give us some optimism. But I feel like I'm a little bit bringing some baggage into this, so I want you guys to check me if I'm wrong here. But we've talked heading into this whole thing about how urgent it was for Milwaukee and how their draft history since Horst took over for the Hammond group there, and the other guy whose name I always forget, who's now running Orlando's front office, Weltman, there we go. The Horst track record has not been good, and it feels like it's another example of that. And I'm not trying to say these players can't hit, but from a value standpoint and from a impact standpoint for a team that wants to win, they reach, from all accounts, similar to the Dylan Jones pick. I would say A.J. Johnson from Australia at 23 with Milwaukee was the other really surprising pick in the first round. And then at 33, Tyler Smith feels like a decent bet. I know a lot of people like him. I think he can succeed just given that he can shoot and he's big, and those are two things the NBA needs right now, but feels, a few years away from being a few years away, and I don't know why the Bucks would be the team that wants to take a chance on that. So do you feel how do you feel about the prospects, Zach, and am I wrong in the evaluation from Milwaukee standpoint?
No, I was with you. I thought the A.J. Johnson pick was probably the most surprising one of the entire draft. I don't think that there were many people that had him even as a first rounder. I honestly, between the two NBL guards that are younger, I like Trenton Flowers a little bit better than him. So I think that the Bucks could have done a lot better by just going Terrence Shannon and Tyler Kolek, just two older guys that you can probably count on to be in your rotation right away. I thought it was interesting that they went the route of projects because of, like you said, they need some rotation players right now. I thought it was really interesting that they went with some guys that might take some time. I mean, Smith, he can shoot the ball and he's big, so maybe he can get on the floor right away. But Johnson, I don't see him playing right away.
Also, what is the Bucks recent success development story? Really, I can't think of one that Beauchamp hasn't really panned out, right? They don't have they
didn't play those guys.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So it's what's the
and Doc doesn't want to even. He's even less predisposed to playing young guys than Adrian Griffin would have been, right? So if you're talking about projects, Doc is not really the coach that you're going to try to do that with. And I've never heard of them being some, heavy G League investment, player development type of team from a front office level. So it's hard to imagine that those guys really get those opportunities, let alone even hit. If you're just talking about talent, I don't know where that's going to come from. They haven't done it like you said, Chris. So, yeah, it's weird. I thought for sure they would be a group that would, target Terrence Shannon, great example, or, be the team to just take Baylor Shireman or just say, screw it. We need a guy. Let's just get one. Let's get somebody that Doc's going to trust and a rotation player that can play 10 minutes a night in the regular season. And they went the absolute opposite direction.
I have one more loser if you want.
Yeah.
I'm putting myself at risk of doing this because
put
I
on your hater.
organization.
Put on your hater hat. Let's go. Let's do it.
I think the Khalil Ware was a weird pick at 15.
I agree. Agree.
I just don't think that they need to put another big next to Bam. And I thought that they should have went with one of the shooters, like a Jared McCain or a Dalton Connect. I just thought they were ready-made players there, or like, long-term players that could be, on-ball creators for them. I think that they really needed like a McCain type to be just a guy that could be just a firepower for them off the bench or in the starting lineup in the future.
Yeah, offensive creation to me was a bigger need for them. Just more big. Another wing is always, I think, a good thing to have. Their development on developing those guys is also just better. Like, maybe they just think they're going to find a second-round guy or something, and the Sioux Falls Magic will figure it out. But, like, I agree with you. Like, you can find a center later. You don't need one necessarily. Like, I'd maybe want a depth, but this felt like a surprise and a reach, and I was also not a fan.
Yeah, but it's just weird. I mean, to the wing point, Chris, Martin and Highsmith are both free agents, so I don't think they'll lose both. But they don't exactly have the depth there that they've been used to having, and we don't know the future with Jimmy. So that felt pretty obvious. Duncan Robinson's always on the trade block, and Hero's same. They could have a very different wing rotation, and there were a lot of players that felt promising in that range. Jacoby Walter, Jalen Tyson, Ryan Dunn would have been a reach there, but guys that had a more surefire way of contributing. But they seem to love a big next to Bam. They've always wanted it. Kelly Olynyk, Myers Leonard, they were in the mix for Edey throughout the process. So they clearly feel like that is at least a look they want to have. And Ware surprised me because he feels a little bit more. He feels a little bit less like the basics, the fundamentals, knows how to just play winning basketball from day one types that they tend to go for. It feels like they're going to need to kind of coach some sense into him and some focus and motor into him a little bit, which is not always the type of player that they go for. So that part of it kind of surprised me, but yeah, a little peculiar. I agree, especially with McCain on the board.
All right, let me give you a winner.
Okay.
Your LA Lakers getting Dalton Connect at 17. That's a great pick for them. The shooter, the attacking, and the closeout, like that's just a win for functionality and for Los Angeles Lakers basketball next year for a guy that we thought might go as high as 10. I just think they're a winner for that pick more than anything else.
Nobody was happier. They showed the war room. JJ Redick, thrilled. He's like, "That's fucking me. That's me. We got me." Yeah. I thought that was hilarious how ecstatic he was for a 17th overall pick. It's like, I know it's your first time here, brother, but we know that's not just about the value. That's a kindred spirit you just got in the door. But Zach, how much better can he get? Like, is this a guy that is what he is? What's the ceiling? Because I'm a big believer that being 23 doesn't mean you're a finished product.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, like, I don't think it's that different the way like we look at him and we did like Desmond Bane. I think that both those guys are unbelievable spot-up shooters, but at the same time, they can also create for themselves a little bit. Connect has like a little bit of a post-up game. He can shoot off the dribble a little bit. He's tough around the basket. Like, I know he's not going to get there a lot. He's not very athletic, but he is a big body. He's strong. And obviously, like, JJ Redick is going to know exactly how to use him. So I do think it's a perfect fit. It's a guy that they know that they're going to be able to throw in their rotation from day one. So if you're Connect, you probably couldn't be happier. And if you're the Lakers, I mean, it almost feels unfathomable that he would be there.
Give me one of your winners, Zach.
I'm just dying at the JJ Redick things.
Give me one of your winners.
I mean, honestly, like, I thought there was a huge player winner. I tweeted about it right after. I had Ron Holland at 13, and I think that him landing with the Pistons, with Fred Vinson, one guy, like a guy that's been notable in getting guys to shoot like in the high 30s, that was probably the best possible prospect landing spot in the whole entire draft. Like, you're talking about a player that only is missing a jump shot, maybe an all-defense wing, can create for himself off the bounce, can finish at the basket, dynamic in transition. Like, you're only really worried about the jumper. Well, Fred Vinson has torn down jumpers and built them back up. So I think that he's going to go to Detroit and become a really good player. Like, I think that having looked at the draft board afterwards, like, I would say he's probably going to be a top 5 player in this class. So, yeah, that was one, just like a player that I liked. And then I thought the Wizards did pretty well. Like, I'm not as high on Sarr as some other people are, but at the same time, like I still had him as my 4th ranked prospect, obviously. And then I think that, Bub Carrington is a player that I was really high on. I had him 12th. And Kaishan George, who, I thought dropped a little bit further than everybody expected as well. I just thought that they got a nice little haul there. I mean, I didn't think that the Deni Avdija trade was great. I mean, I guess like they just don't see themselves winning on his timeline. But to come away with 3 players that I think are really talented is a nice draft.
I love when teams.
I like the use of Deni Avdija timeline.
Well, yeah, as if he has his own. No, I was just going to say I like when teams just take multiple bites, draft as many guys as you possibly can. You don't want to go overboard on any one given draft, but I'd like being kind of flexible with that and just saying, hey, if we get 3 rookies every year, somebody's going to be good, and we have all the development space in the world, so why not just take advantage of that, especially if the value's nice and you're bringing guys in who are higher ceiling, like George, like Carrington, and obviously Sarr is kind of the epitome of that. So on that side, I liked it. On the Holland side, back to him, though, Zach, can he play with Asar Thompson, or is this just like they cannot share the floor until one of them can shoot?
Yeah, I mean, I feel similarly about this as I do with the Bulls drafting Matas Buzelis and then trading for Josh Giddey. It's like someone is going to have to figure it out, and they're going to have to do it pretty fast because I don't think they can play together. But I do think that with Detroit bringing in Vincent, like that's something that's going to change in a hurry. I think that they made that hire knowing that they wanted Holland, and I think that they made that hire like knowing that they need to fix Asar. So I think that they're in good hands there. They're gonna really learn how to shoot. And I do think that eventually you're talking about a wing duo that could be, great on both ends of the floor.
At least we know the Pistons coach can coach them all up into a winning unit, and we can trust the style they're going to implement, right?
That's a tough situation where you draft the guys and then make the coach figure it out, but whatever.
James Borrego,
and you have assistants already locked into the staff and everything. It's like, hey, make this work. Good luck.
We should mention the Minnesota Timberwolves, by the way. I mean, I just thought that like going for it with Dillingham was absolutely the right move. I think that you're bringing in a player that I think that they needed. Like I was thinking all summer, kind of like all summer, like it's over. But I was thinking that they needed to move Towns for one of those 2 Hawks guards. That was kind of the fix that I wanted to see for Minnesota. But being able to hold on to him and bringing in just a really, really creative bucket getter, like I think that's going to work in that team because they obviously have defense behind him that could make up for his deficiencies there. So I thought that going for Dillingham made a lot of sense, and I thought Terrence Shannon Jr. is a player that's going to be really solid as well.
All right, let me ask one last guy here. I needed you to tell me how to feel about Jalen Tyson to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I
was really high on Tyson. I did the Suns show with Brendan. I said that I liked him for the Suns. If it was at 22, it was at 22. But I think the 20 was a good value. I just think that this is a guy that has been a 3-and-D player before. So if that's what he needs to do, it's what he needs to do. But there's some offensive creation ability like on the ball. I think he can pass a little bit. And defensively, he competes. And he's got good size on the wing. He's not huge, but he's 6'7". He competes, has some length. I think that he's a player that's going to slot in really nicely, potentially as a fifth starter there eventually.
Cool. I feel a little more validated by the fact that they went and got like a big wing, and I like that team feels like the more is to come. Obviously, they feels like there's some stuff that's going to happen this summer. Bringing Atkinson, who did some player development stuff in Brooklyn, I think pretty well. So like it's kind of got him to figure that out. It feels like, but it feels like if they're going to evolve this team, that's the kind of piece they probably needed. Is what it looks like to me. It's particularly if they do continue to run the Allen Mobley thing, which feels like they might try to do. It feels like so. I don't know what's going on there.
Before we close, I just thinking about teams that hit well. I think it's just because we like to laugh at this team that they're not getting more salute from NBA fans, but Devin Carter going to Sacramento feels just about perfect in terms of, the Sabonis fit is always tricky. It's not as if Carter solves the front court problem, the rim protection issues, everything else, but just in terms of a guy who they clearly wanted when they drafted Davion Mitchell. They've tried, Keon Ellis, and who they just traded in the second round. Yeah. And Keon Ellis, and they've kept throwing darts at this thing, and they just sat there. They always take the best player available, it feels like, in terms of kind of consensus, and they just didn't trade it for Kuzma or whatever else. And honestly, I feel like if I'm coming away with Carter, that's a lot better than any of the trades that were on the table, and I still have those trades if I want to make them.
Yeah, and you just mentioned they were trying to find him. I think that they were trying to get Alex Caruso as well, so they ended up getting a guy that can do some similar things. I think that Carter is going to be able to play right away. And interestingly enough, like I've compared Carter's jumper to Halliburton, so it's interesting that like the same team is ignoring kind of the weird looking jumper and just saying, look, this guy can shoot. He's hitting good percentages. We think that's going to translate. So it was an interesting spot to see that go there. I do think he's going to be really good. I think I agree with you.
Love it.
Let me ask one last thing to wrap us up, Zach. Just tell me what team you're most not negative, not even bad. Just where are you? Who confused you? Who made you who you just kind of baffled by in terms of you're trying to still figure it out?
I mean, the Bucks definitely confused me. I just thought that was a really strange pick, but outside of that, I don't know. There weren't that many teams that I thought made horrible selections. I kind of didn't love Tidjane Salaam to the Hornets. I thought that there were better fits there.
Yeah, that one seemed surprising.
It feels like they can use some immediate returns, even if it's a player that does have long-term potential, maybe not an older guy. I thought that was a little bit too project-y for what they needed there.
It's just I hate to dump on them because they've changed everything. The owner's different, the GM's different. They got Charles Lee, so I'm kind of just looking at the laundry and making assumptions here. But I just look at whether it's James Bouknight, it's Grant Riller, it's Cody Martin. They just have never developed the long shot guys or the can they become something guys. They've really torpedoed the growth of a lot of players that have come through, and that's just their track record. So for them to take the kind of ball of clay guy, the unknown kind of mystery man of the draft, it's good luck, but are you that? Are you really the team to get it out of him? But, I guess we could have said that about Washington last year. They take Coulibaly, they trade up to get Coulibaly and give assets to go out and do that, and he had a pretty nice summer league, a great summer league, a pretty nice rookie year, and they've kind of proven that they're actually smarter than they used to be for the time being. So maybe that's what's happening with the Hornets. I'll believe it for now, but yeah, if I'm Salon, I'm really, Charlotte? I had to end up here,
And I guess I'll throw in. I really love the player. Like I just said, I just came on before and said I love the way that he's shooting the ball. I didn't understand the Blazers going with Klingon or any big man. I didn't understand the interest in Zach Edey. I just thought that after what they did last summer with DeAndre Ayton and Robert Williams, it just didn't make a lot of sense to me that they're this quickly running out and going for a center. But I guess at the same time, it's a bad team, and if you see a potential star in there, you go out and grab him. It's going to be hard for him to earn minutes, and the other guys are going to be pretty unhappy.
Yeah, I just don't also like the cling. I don't like that for clinging because I think he could have gotten somewhere more room to grow, and now it's a little less clear. So that's tough.
Yeah. I mean, Ayton's not long for the team. Robert Williams not long for the team, but for right now, they're both there, and they're not exactly easy players to move given injuries for Rob and inconsistency and expensive salary for Ayton. I mean, if both of those guys were on the Blazers come opening night, even if Portland doesn't want that to happen, I wouldn't be surprised. And then Donovan's kind of just sitting there. So yeah, he's ready to come in and play, and he might not be able to do that. That's absolutely right. That's Wes and I's reverse mock draft where we were picking teams for players. That definitely was not where we would have put Mr. Klingon.
No, it would have been tough. All right, we're gonna end there though. This has been a jam-packed draft episode and Knicks trader episode of the Just Basketball Show. Thanks to Zach for all of his work covering the draft with us. Result Cycle will have him back on in the future, I'm sure. Thanks to Brendon Kleen. Thanks to Wes Goldberg. Everyone will talk to you on Monday. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.